So today's lesson is rounding. We know the rules to rounding, but this one actually gets a little bit more complicated because we need to know our place values as well. So we know that when we are rounding, that the rule always is if the number is 5 or more, we round up, right? And that if it is less than 5, we round down. Meaning 6 becomes 10, 4 becomes 0, kind of a thing. Now, when we are rounding, what gets us into trouble is not knowing our place value.
Isn't it 5 to 10? The upper?
When we are rounding, what gets us in trouble is the place values, not knowing them. So let's say I have the number 259,471. That's my number. And let's say that it was going to ask me to round it to the nearest 100,000. So when I am doing the nearest 100,000, that means I need to find that place value first and underline it. So what number is in the 100,000s place? The 2. So I always first underline the number it's asking me to change. It wants me to find the nearest 100,000. I find the 100,000 and I underline it. The next step that I do is I look at the number that comes right after it. And I need all of you drawing these arrows too. This is a skill. I look at the number right after it. If it is more than 5, I round up. It is 5, so that means I am going to round up. So I draw another arrow to my 2 to show that that 2 is going to change. And everything else I don't care about. Everything else turns into 0. So this gets rounded up to 300,000. Now let's try it with the same number. 259,471. But now we're going to round it to the nearest 10,000. So I underline what number is in the place value of 10,000? The 5. Underline the 5. Then I draw an arrow to the number that comes before it. That's where I'm looking. 9 is greater than 5. So I draw another number to change that 5. 5 is going to become a 6, and everything else gets zeroed out. So my new number is 260,000. Let's try it again with the same number. 259,471. Now we're going to round it to the nearest 1,000. So I underline my 9. Draw an arrow to look at my 4. That 4 is less than 5. So what I do there is I stop. The 4 is not going to affect the 9. The 4 zeroes itself out, making this number become 259,000. Okay. Let's do it again. 259,471. Oops. So now I'm looking at to the nearest 100. Now, whenever I am doing this, any number that comes before the underlined number stays the same. It doesn't change. It doesn't get affected. It's only the numbers that come after that get affected. So remember that. Draw my arrow to look at the 7. 7 is greater than 5, so it will change that 4. The 4 becomes a 5, the 7 gets zeroed out. So my new number is now 259,500. This is where mistakes are made. You accidentally put 400 instead of 500. Or you accidentally put 260,000 instead of 259,000. Or 259,400. That's where mistakes are made. So please, 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 that's why we do these arrows. These arrows force you to follow that routine. These arrows make it so that you have to pay attention no matter what is happening. Let's try another one. 259,471. This time to the nearest 10. So I underline the place value. I draw an arrow to the number coming before it, the number 1. 1 does not do anything to 7. It's going to zero itself out. So it becomes 259,470. And we don't round to the nearest 1.
Do you ever round to the nearest 5? Or
No, it's only 0 or 10 is when we're rounding. You either go all the way down or all the way up. I mean, you'll notice that every single one of these numbers always ends in a 0, no matter what. That's because it's estimation. I'm not going to say I work about 42.37 hours a week. No, I'll say I work about 40. Or I don't say I have $13.75 in my wallet. I'd say, yeah, I've got about 14 bucks. Or I might just say, yeah, I've got about 10 bucks, so I can only save the 3. So when we're rounding, we're not using accurate numbers. When we're doing math and we're having to add up numbers and they say estimation or about, if I'm working in a car industry and I'm building thousands upon thousands of cars a day, if I did 15,789 cars, I'm probably going to just say we did about 16,000 today. Because that's just easier. So it's always and forever going to end in a 0. Because that's just how rounding works. It's not by 5s. We're not doing like compatible numbers, and we'll talk about that later. So now let's practice it with different numbers. Let's look at number 1. It's showing me 128,955. And then it shows the 8 is underlined. So what's my first step? I've already underlined my place value, so what's the next step? Draw my arrow. Is it more than 5 or less than 5? It's more, so then I draw a second arrow to show that the 8 changes. The 8 will become a 9 and everything else will zero out. So what is my new number? 129,000. That's it. Let's try number 2. 85,639. And the 3 is underlined. So automatically, the 8, 5, and 6 stay put. They don't change. So I can even go, okay, well, my first part of the number is going to be 8, 5, 6. Because anything before that underlined number stays put. I draw my arrow to the 9. I go, is 9 greater or less than?
Greater.
It's greater. So I draw my second arrow to say that 3 is going to change. The 3 is going to become a 4, and the 9 is going to be a 0. So 40. 85,640. Let's try number 3. I need to see everybody writing this down, everybody doing these arrows. 9,924, and the 9 in the thousands place has been underlined. Draw an arrow to my 9. 9 is greater than 5, so I draw an arrow back to the other 9. They're changing each other. Now, this 9 becomes a 10. I can't have 0,000. That 9 becomes a 10. So I have 10,000. And everything else zeroes out.
10,000.
10,000. Let's look at number 4. 194,542. And my 9 in the 10,000s place is underlined. Draw my arrow. Underneath, it's pointing to the 4. 4 is less than 5, so the 9 stays put and everything else gets zeroed out. So it becomes 19,000. Let's try number 5. 160,656. The 1 is underlined. So I'm looking at this 6. Whoops, that's 190,000, not 19,000. Ha ha ha. So we're looking at the 6. 6 is greater than 5, so it's changing that 1. So everything about this number becomes different. That 1 becomes a 2, and then everything after that is a 0. So it becomes 200,000. Are we understanding how to do this?
Yeah.
The most important thing that I want to see on everybody's paper are these arrows. Okay, these hold you accountable. They take no extra time to do. Now, there's one more thing that I want to talk to you about, is numbers when rounding can kind of be a little tricky. There is a question in your problem solving that I want to just do together now. And it's number 32. And it says, write a number that when rounded to the nearest 1,000 and 100 will have a result that is the same. So what that means is, if I have a number and I round it to 1,000, and then I go back and do it again and round it to 100, it'll be the same answer. So let's say if I have 952. Let's make that 3,952 so I can have my thousands place. If I were to round that to the nearest thousands, that 9 changes to 3 and it becomes 4,000, right? If I were to do the same thing and round it to the nearest 100, that 9 looks at the 5. 5 will change that 9. That 9 becomes a 10, and everything else zeroes out. Well, 39, basically one more is 40, right? So that becomes 4,000.
So that's our answer?
So, well, that's one way to do it. When you're doing it, you need to give me a different number.
Like, so you can't do...
You cannot use 3,952. You have to come up with your own number when you're doing number 32 on your own. But this is to show you what it means. Now, you can follow, guys, it's not going to take much for you to figure out your own because you just got to change really one number.
Exactly.
But to show that certain numbers, how they affect each other, no matter how they're rounded, will still get you the same answer.
I have a question.
Yes.
When are we doing that? Because it says 8 through 20.
So, that's just to look at 32. The rest of these problem solving, this is going to be a little bit tricky only because it's asking you to kind of go deeper into rounding. It's not just the arrows and rounding of numbers, okay? So I want you to really be focused, and this is when it's really important to show your work. Our brains get tricked so easily if we're rushing. Showing our work will really help us out.